Welcome to Military Faith and Spiritual Resilience. This is Elizabeth Fulgaro. With me today is Erin Nichols, nutrition and fitness coach and Gold Star wife. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Elizabeth.
So you were talking about how Sam and you had met and became Sam and Erin, and you were still in high school, or you had started community college. So and you were in the Air Force, ROTC. How did Sam end up in the Marines?
Sam was born in the wrong century.
Okay.
He had kind of this inner warrior about him. He loved ancient China and Japan, the samurai tradition, Vikings. His grandparents were Norwegian, and his dad had tried to join the Marine Corps. He went to boot camp and ended up medically discharged during boot camp with an injury. But it had just kind of always been with him. He was always really into the Marines. He wasn't chest-beatingly patriotic, but he had this sense of duty.
Sure.
Still. So it just given our time, the Marine Corps for him was it. If it was a different time, he would have been a knight or a samurai or a ninja or
totally makes sense.
Whatever.
Now, what year are we now? Where are we?
So that was 2003. So at that point, I had moved in to his parents' house. I lived in his oldest brother had moved out a couple years before. So I had my own room, and I was working part-time at CarMax and going to school at the community college. Sam was working at Albertsons, our local grocery store, part-time. And then also he did a year at a community college as well, the same community college. And so one day I came home from work and I get can you come here? I need to talk. And it's heart sinks. And so I sit down on the end of the bed, and he tells me that he thinks he wants to join the military. Probably the Marine Corps, but he'll go to all the recruiters and see what's up. And so this was March or April of 2003. So for context, we defeated the Iraqi Republican Guard in May of 2003. So this is, right at the kind of at the beginning of Iraq and Afghanistan. And, at that point, we also thought that this was going to be much more like a Desert Storm, Desert Shield kind of thing as far as the time frame goes. And I come from a military family. I come from an Air Force family. I was born on an Air Force base, Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. My dad got out actually right when I was born. He grew up as an Air Force brat himself, lived all over the world, went to a Spanish-speaking kindergarten in Spain, not speaking Spanish. And my grandpa's last duty station was Beale Air Force Base in Northern California, and that's how they ended up where they did. And I have an aunt who was married to a pilot in the Air Force, and when I was a kid, got to go and stay with them, and I loved being on base. My cousin and I were 12, and my aunt was we're out of honey. Girls go up to the store and get us a bear of honey. And we just hopped on bikes and went over and did it. And I thought, wow, that is so cool that we can just do that. And there's no way in our neighborhood with big streets and everything. It wasn't that far away. The closest grocery store was only 1.5 miles, 2 miles away, but my mom wouldn't have let me do that, at home. And so the idea of living on a military base and having an income, having insurance, having a place to live, it solved a lot of problems for us as these young adults who were kind of too big for our britches in a lot of ways. We just didn't know what we wanted yet. And kind of the thing that was stopping us from getting married, because we were only 18 and 19, but people are, when are you guys going to get married? Because we'd been, other than that time that we had been broken up, 5 months or so, we'd been together for almost 4 years already. And so we weren't getting married because the only thing that would change if we got married is that we would be able to share a room. But we would still be living at his parents' house. We would still be working part-time and going to school. And so this kind of solved that, like, how do we start our adult lives problem? And then again, we didn't think that the war in Iraq was going to be what it turned out to be. So, he went to the recruiting stations, and kind of as we expected, he settled on the Marine Corps. And because we'd been on an ROTC, we had relationships with the recruiters as well. So great Marine name. Sergeant Hercules was his recruiter.
That's a great name. That is a great name.
And started the process. And because the Marine Corps is so small, it takes several months between the time that you join what's called the delayed entry program and you actually leave for boot camp. So, that was like March or April. And then he went to boot camp, I think October 13th. So as we're having this conversation in the bedroom, I'm almost kind of relieved that, like, okay, we have like a plan. And then I think it was me that said, like, all right, we should get married then before then. That way, like, the paperwork's done and it'll make the transition easier.
So super efficient.
Yes.
And efficient, yeah, makes sense.
The recruiters didn't love it because it was more work for them, but that's what we did. So we both worked at a country club. I was working at CarMax at that point, but I had worked at a country club for like a year and a half. Sam worked there for a little while. His brother did as well. And we'd seen all these fancy weddings. They had a bunch of adult cousins that were between like 5 and 10 years older than him. And so it was like at least once a year, there was a big Nichols family wedding. And as special as every bride is, really when you think about it, like all weddings just kind of run together. And it's just a big extravagant thing. And to us, the wedding itself wasn't important. Didn't want to spend a lot of money, just not into all the pomp and circumstance. And so we just wanted it to be casual and fun. And so, in fact, our wedding invitation was a flyer that said, "It's a wedding." And we just had it at Folsom Lake at Granite Point. There's a activity center there that you can rent. So like a bathroom and a kitchen and air conditioning because it was end of July that we ended up having our wedding. Yeah, and the ceremony was outside. So we were mostly in the shade, at least our guests were in the shade. The wedding party during the ceremony, we were mostly in the sun and dripping sweat. But yeah, so we just ended up doing it outside. It was kind of like island theme, Hawaiian themed. And when you look at the pictures, because you can see the water and then the foothills behind us during the ceremony, it kind of passes. People think if they just see the pictures, they think, oh, wow, you got married in Hawaii.
It sounds like you made it fun for yourself and your guests.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we wanted. We wanted it to be a wedding that stood out, not because of how fancy and opulent it was, but just because of how like casual and fun and comfortable it was. So we told people, like, bring your towels, bring your swim stuff. Ties will be confiscated at the car, literally on the invitation. And yeah, we just kind of needed like a barbecue buffet kind of deal and just had a good time. It's kind of funny because it was the end of July. It was July 27th, 2003. It was like 104 degrees outside. And so I think we had the ceremony at maybe 11 in the morning. So by the time we were all done with everything, it was 4 o'clock or something. And for our honeymoon, we did a California road trip where we're going to drive down to San Diego first and then kind of make our way back up the coast. So we weren't going to leave till the next morning. So we spent our wedding night at Lake Natoma Inn, which is right on the American River, Lake Natoma, and right there in town. And we get to the room and unpack. We like counted our loot because he was about to join the Marine Corps, we'd put on the invitation as well, like we don't have anywhere to put stuff, so a money tree will be available. Hint, hint. No toasters, please. Just cold hard cash. So we counted up our money, put it in the safe, and then we're like, "Yeah, I'm hungry," and we ended up at Chevy's for on our wedding night. Our wedding afternoon. It was probably like 4 or 5 o'clock, and then this guy from high school ended up being our server, which was kind of funny.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, hey, Carl." He's like, "Oh, hey, guys, what are you up to?" Sam's like, "Oh, yeah, we just got married." Like, "Oh, yeah, when?" "Oh, like 4 hours ago." "What are you doing at Chevy's?" But, yeah, and then now actually my co-working space is right there. It's in the same building as where Chevy's is. I look at the Lake Natoma Inn every day.
Oh, you're still in this. That's neat.
Yeah.
That's kind of neat to have those connections that are still there. So Sam starts boot camp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was not a great time for me.
What happened?
I didn't recognize it at the time, but it was definitely my first bout of depression. My best friend was gone for the first time. Obviously, it was very different than when we were broken up, but it was rough. I spent the first night. I think I spent the night at my parents' house that night, but then otherwise, I stayed with my in-laws, and I was actually the only kid at home for a while. My oldest brother-in-law had moved out a long time ago, and then my middle brother-in-law was living in Long Beach at the time. And then he ended up moving back up maybe the last month before Sam graduated boot camp. But yeah, I was the only kid at home with my in-laws for a couple months. And I was just kind of existing. I was working at CarMax still, and glad I had kind of a good, community there. I was working in the business office, but I had initially started in sales. So I had my business office people, but then I was friends with all the sales people, and which were mostly guys, and they all like really looked out for me and made sure I was doing okay. But when I wasn't at work, it was just a real bummer. And I would, on days that I didn't work or whatever, I would just lie around in my pajamas. And I remember the thing that I ate most often, this is really sad, especially knowing what I know now about nutrition, was instant mashed potatoes and canned corn.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. There was probably some chicken in there every now and then. But
Erin, did you recognize it as depression at the time?
Not at all. I was in denial about any mental health issues until maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay, so that would have been almost more than 10 years.
Yeah.
So you had 10 years that you battled with stuff.
Yeah.
Which people do.
Yeah.
But without recognizing what it was.
Well, and it was really denial too, because there's a significant family history. And so I didn't want that to be a thing.
Is the history depression?
My mom has had major clinical depression for 20-ish years. Her sister has significant mental health issues, and their mom was both bipolar and paranoid schizophrenic. So that was the main thing that really scared me, was my grandma. She died right before I turned 4. And I have 2 really specific memories. One was really pleasant and nice. I can picture the center island in their kitchen, and it was either like an avocado green or an orange, like 70s.
Yes.
And there were like drawers in the island, and in one of the lower drawers, she kept the pinwheel cookies.
Oh, yum.
And so I remember I knew that, and I was like going with her to go get the cookies. So that's the positive memory. And then one time they were, my Nana and Papa were watching me while my parents went to dinner or something. And I was sitting on the floor playing with Duplos or some sort of blocks. And I don't remember what she said, but she like snapped at me about something. And I just remember being like really confused. But my grandpa was there and like fixed the situation, whatever it was. But I just remember being like kind of like scared and confused. And I was like 3. But, you know, I grew up hearing literally horror stories from my mom and my aunt about what they went through in their childhood. And so that has always been on my mind. And she got married. She and my grandpa married when she was 14 and then had her kids at 15, 16, and 17.
Oh, my.
And now I know that if you are going to have paranoid schizophrenia, you often get it manifests in your late teens or 20s. So it was just, if you're going to have it, that's when you're going to get it. But in my mind, as growing up, I was thinking her hormones changed because she had babies.
Sure.
And that's how she got it. So I was always even afraid just to like get pregnant because I thought that was going to essentially give me paranoid schizophrenia.
Those are really scary thoughts that you had to have for a really long time.
Yeah.
And what I'd like to do is, can we continue talking in this vein? And maybe also talk a little bit about where your spirituality was during these years in the next episode?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Erin.